welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Hawaiian Electric's Resilient and Renewable Energy Community Workshops. We're here live tonight in the Waianae Moku. Mahalo to all of you who are joining us both in person and virtually. Just real briefly, wanted to introduce myself. I'm Kurt Sue. I'm the Director for Community Affairs at Hawaiian Electric. On to my side here is Alani Apio of Kamau LLC. He'll be our facilitator for tonight. Our speakers will be Ken Aramaki. He's Hawaiian Electric's Director of Transmission, Distribution, and Interconnection Planning. And we also have joining us one of our partners from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Katie Wachter. She's a Geospatial Science Researcher 3 for NREL. And joining us for the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting will be our Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology, Colton Ching. Also wanted to recognize our partners at the Centers for Resilient Neighborhoods. They are joining us here due to their work on working with within residential communities on defining and working on establishing resilience hubs in communities. And so we're really appreciative again for all of you spending your evening with us. Alani?
Aloha. Apparently somebody talks louder than Kurt. Aloha, everybody. So Monday night was our first meeting out in Kahuku. And a couple of thoughts from that presentation and that work. One is, and you folks, I think we all know this, as human beings, it's a lot easier to get excited about the things that we want to fight against, rather than the long, arduous, boring, oftentimes work of planning. And these meetings are long-term planning meetings. So we are deeply thankful for the community members that have come out tonight and those that are online. We also know that this is a very strange and challenging time to be on the earth and in our lives, right? Coming out of a worldwide pandemic, and out is relative. We're all still struggling with everything that we've gone through and still go through. My work in Waianae goes back 21 years. I started working with the leaders out in this community for Board of Water Supply Dao back in 2001. And so I have a great aloha and affinity for the Waianae Coast and have long relationships with the leaders. Important for tonight is, and I was talking to Cynthia earlier about this, this is the start of a new project and a lot of work. And it is deeply important that we get you folks as community members, as community leaders, as much as we can to be involved in this process, because nothing good gets built on these islands without us as community members being an integral part of that. And so I'm gonna lean on my relationships with you folks as leaders to know that I'm here to be an advocate for your voice. I'm a neutral facilitator, but I'm here to advocate for your folks' voices, your mana'o, your experience, your deep wisdom about this coastline to be heard and recorded. And so, as Kurt will explain, all of these meetings are being recorded. The feedback will get synthesized, but not edited. So that which the community gives will go unedited into the reports, so much as we're capable of doing that in the sense of understanding. There's two parts to this discussion and presentation tonight, both of which are going to be, after we do the presentations, we're going to open the floor to you folks. And that's where my work will come in talking with you guys about what you want to share. Two things, please don't hold back. Please don't hold back your criticisms and your critiques. And then secondly, know that this is the start of a process that, in one sense, unfortunately, will take years. Because as you guys know, if you want a big power plant built or some kind of power project, it takes years of planning, years of permitting, and then years of work. So this is a long haul, and we're thankful for your being here, and we hope that other community members will come in along with that. Thank you.
Mahalo, Alani. And so purpose of tonight's meeting is to do what Alani mentioned. There's a lot happening in the energy space, and there's really important work to be done with community. And we're in the early planning stages of making our grid more resilient and also decarbonizing our grid. And that's really the purpose of tonight's meeting. For those of you joining us both in person and virtually, we are trying something new. This was a way to try and make ourselves more accessible. We understand there's a lot of challenges coming to meetings, and so we're trying for the first time partnering with Olelo to live broadcast this meeting, as well as to have it recorded and documented for future viewing if people can't join us tonight. But all of this, again, as Alani said, all of the input that's gathered will be documented. And there's going to be ways we'll be talking about where we're really trying to make it easier for communities to participate in our planning processes. For those of you joining us online, we had an open house to start. The only difference in the information that's being shared is that you would have had a chance to talk face to face with our subject matter experts, and we had light meal and refreshments. So we'll have more of these workshops, and if you are interested in coming out in person, food will be provided. So just mahalo to everybody for coming out. Our communities count on Hawaiian Electric to keep the lights on, and it's also our responsibility to stabilize our energy costs. And we know that's a big challenge right now. And that's really the importance of us transitioning off of fossil fuels is to stabilize the costs for us on the islands. And that's really an important part of why we're here tonight, is really working with the community as part of our planning as we transition to renewable energy. And we understand that there are many concerns right now about the renewable energy development and costs, and we absolutely will have follow-up discussions to talk about these things going forward. But the primary reason why we're here tonight is we need to decarbonize our energy system and make it more resilient in light of climate change. And all of us have seen the recent examples in Puerto Rico and Florida, which underscores the importance for us to make these important changes and to prepare and to plan. And that's again why we're here tonight. We're trying to again make it easier to participate, because this planning can sometimes be a long and complex process. But we've learned over time that it really is going to take working together to solve many of the challenges that are in front of us. Can we show the first slide, please? So just a summary of what we'll be talking about tonight is a good portion of our meeting is going to be focused on resilience. And so especially here out in the Waianae-Moku coastal community, Farrington Highway being the way in and out of the community, really looking at prioritizing how can we help from an energy perspective support the community in becoming more resilient. And so one potential solution is something called microgrids. And then, so we'll be sharing some information about that. And that's the reason why we have the opportunity to work with our partners at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, on getting input on how we can plan to make our communities more resilient island-wide. And the second half of our meeting will focus on renewable energy, because when we're talking about microgrids, it requires power to power microgrids in the event of an emergency. And so we want to hear from communities, ultimately, what types of options would be up for consideration, but also to get input on how we can, at this very early stage, plan and work together. We recognize that every challenge, every solution will come with its own set of challenges. There's no perfect choices in all of this. So really working with communities is of the utmost importance. There's so much that we've learned from this particular community out in the Waianae-Moku, particularly with some of the leaders that are here with us tonight. It really helped us understand the importance of sharing information early and helping to inform communities to help participate in the process. Can we go to the next slide, please, Ken? So this is just what essentially the balance that needs to be achieved as we move forward. From our side, traditionally, it's been technical engineering solutions, making the grid work, keeping the lights on, making sure that we have reliability and planning for resilience. But we are very much understanding of the fact that community input is an important part of that process. It cannot be technical planning alone. We have to ask ourselves, how do these changes impact our communities, both from an infrastructure as well as from a community lens? And what are the community's priorities as part of these changes? And really, West Oahu, the Waianae Moku has done a lot, has influenced the improvements that have been made recently in our renewable energy development process. Really want to commend the West Oahu Kalailoa Clean Energy Ohana. It was really a good example that shows what can happen when communities come together and align in their interests. So that group that I mentioned, they came together and aligned priorities, and they filed a document with the Public Utilities Commission with their understanding of what the community's needs were, as well as what they would like to see as part of the renewable development process going forward. And those changes, a lot of those changes were accepted and implemented in our processes. And so that really is a good model to follow for us going forward in terms of how we can work with communities to improve all the work that we have that's in front of us. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of challenges, a lot of obstacles, and every community is unique and different. And so it's really important that we have that participation early and upfront. And that's what this is. This is really an opportunity to share the same information that we are at Hawaiian Electric are looking at from a planning perspective, and helping to make it more digestible, more accessible, so that we can create our plans with community. And so again, just thank you for all of you who are joining us as part of that process, because it has made a significant difference in how we plan and how we will move forward. But with that, I will transition over to Ken. Ken, would you like to begin?
Yeah. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I'll be going over a few slides about what we call our microgrid mapping project. And then we're going to bring up Katie from NREL, and she'll talk a little bit more about the details that went into it so far. And then we're going to do like a interactive type of Q&A. So to start, energy, as well as all of these other lifelines that are shown, these are lifelines. So these are considered critical lifelines that if any of these are impacted, they impact all of our, basically the community's lives. And central to that is energy. They're all interconnected, but energy supports and powers all of these lifelines. And before we get into the microgrid mapping, I want to make sure that everyone, so that set a little context of the different types of microgrids we have. So our energy system, it was built generally as a one-way flow of energy, starting from bulk energy, large generators transmitted at high voltages, and then stepped down through substations and ultimately gets to our customers. Over the past, decade plus, there have been much more renewable energy generation that's added to the grid, and they're added at different points of the system. In addition to that, customers have also been able to add their own generation at their own sites. And what these, with advancements in functionality over the past few years, they've been able to not just provide energy to offset their energy costs, but also have their own what's considered customer microgrids. So customer microgrids are microgrids that are generally one customer, it's a behind the meter microgrid, so like one customer that can provide backup energy to their facility in times of a grid outage or emergency. What we're sort of going to be focused on today is what's called a hybrid microgrid. So when you look at this circle, which consists of multiple customers, multiple generating resources, possibly other customer microgrids within it, this is what we call a hybrid microgrid. So a hybrid microgrid is made up of multiple customers, multiple generating resources, and everything is kind of pulled together, or what we call aggregated, and that can provide additional resilience in a time of a grid outage. And so we have programs that allow this to happen, to occur, and this is, sorry. And when we were working on a program to allow this, we instantly knew that this kind of system is complex, and for customers, it's really hard for them to understand, to even know where there's an opportunity for them to build this, because there's grid information that would be needed. There's also other considerations that should be considered to even know is a hybrid microgrid right for me or my community. At about the same time that we were working on that program, there was this ETIP opportunity, so Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project. So we call it ETIP because that's a lot of words. So the ETIP is basically a microgrid mapping, we applied for this ETIP. It's not a grant because this program, and basically what we got is the opportunity to get pro bono work by national labs. And for our project, we were one of the 11 selected in the first cohort that we got National Renewable Energy Laboratories, or NREL, and we'll say that a lot because Katie's from NREL. So we got NREL to work on our project, as well as Sandia National Labs, another laboratory. And so they help us to essentially develop this map that can identify areas that are potential opportunities to develop a hybrid microgrid, so that customers at least have that initial step to know if that solution is a potential for them. So this is just kind of an initial take. And Katie will come up next to talk more about the kind of what went into the initial stages of this mapping.
Thanks, Ken. There we go. Okay, so like Ken was saying, I guess National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL, was able to work with engineers from the Sandia National Laboratories. And I wanted to thank them for helping out with this because I'm a geographer, not an engineer, and I couldn't do that by myself. So in figuring out where we could start considering opportunities for hosting hybrid microgrids, we came up with 3 general criteria, and they include criticality. So that criterion is asking where are the critical loads, facilities, and services. So we wanted to make sure we included places where people would go in the event of emergency or are critical in an emergency, such as emergency shelters, fire stations, emergency operations centers. We also wanted to include emergency medical facilities and medical facilities that would affect life and limb if power was not available. So that includes hospitals, outpatient facilities, surgical centers, and skilled care facilities, as well as critical infrastructure. So this includes water sources, water treatment, internet exchange points, transmission towers, dams, bridges, ports, airports. It's a long list, and I don't want to go through all of it and take all of our night. And the second criterion we considered was vulnerability. So asking what parts of the grid currently and are projected to endure the longest and most frequent outages. So for this, we included natural hazards as well as inaccessibility. So we included things like tsunami evacuation zones, special flood hazard areas, so that's 1% flood areas, as well as sea level rise through 2050 with the low emissions RCP scenario, as well as fire risk, landslide risk. I think that's it. And then additional outages from Hawaiian Electric, we were able to look at a 10-year range and look at kind of an index that includes the duration of an outage as well as the frequency of interruption in service. And then the third criterion we looked at was societal impact. So figuring out what other locations would significantly impact communities if they lost power. So this includes residential care facilities, community homes, schools, daycares, libraries, as well as customers receiving assistance, and those within a disadvantaged community, which follows the Department of Energy's definition, which comes from the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, which looks at 36 different measures of burden. So what we're really looking for in this is finding where are the locations that have some kind of overlap in all three criteria that we're looking at. But we also want to figure out, are these criteria sufficient for, looking at these hybrid microgrid opportunities? Are there things that we're missing and not thinking about? So this mapping covers all of Oahu. It incorporates dozens of spatial data sets representing our different criteria as well as distribution infrastructure. And so with all of that data, we built a model showing where grid-connected customer energy resources like rooftop solar panels are and where they overlap with electricity demand to figure out where they're balanced and hybrid microgrids could be more easily sited. But what that really showed us is that this map is incomplete. It focuses on the infrastructure and not the people that live here and how they're affected by service disruptions. So this is where you all come in. We've included a lot of data in our analyses, but we really would like to know from you, are there criteria that are missing, things that are important to you and your communities? What places do you actually go in an emergency? What other places should be included? This is like to the building level we want to know. And we love to have your perspective. So we've prepared this map to help show you what we've included so far. I know we're going to flash this up quickly, but this is also available online at hawaiipowered.com/ETIP. That's ETIPP. And for folks in the room, there's also a QR code and the link, I think, on the back side of the handout that Sam had up front. So I encourage you to look that up, and you can take as much time as you need to look it over. I know it's a lot to look at, and we are really excited to hear what you have to share. So at the end of this exercise, this project, which is not going to be the end of this process looking at hybrid microgrids, the labs are going to share community level maps like this one for HOLA for microgrid or hybrid microgrid opportunities. So we're trying to show here where the criteria and important community resources meet. So yeah, I encourage you to visit hawaiipowered.com/ETIP and check out what we have there and tell us anything and everything that you're willing to share about places in your community and what's important. So I think I'd like to turn it back over to you. Alani?
Real quick, Alani, just to mention for everybody joining us, so you can do this if you're here in person as well as if you're joining us virtually. We're going to be using a program called Menti. And so two options. You can either use your mobile device and scan the QR code using your camera, and it'll take you to the Menti website. Or you can just go on your browser to www.menti.com and enter the code shown here. We're going to have some prompting questions that Alani's going to run us through, but just in summary, again, what the work that Katie and the NREL team and others have done was really just a technical analysis. And so again, as we mentioned in the beginning, what we're going to be trying, what we would like to do is to share that with all of you, but asking that question, what's missing? And how can we include what's important to the community? As Katie mentioned, we have a lot of the usual suspect facilities already included, like the medical centers, police stations, and fire stations. But on top of that, what is really important to the community? What sites are we missing? And even in the criteria, what could we potentially include to better capture the community's needs in this as part of this process? Alani.
Mahalo, Kurt. So I want to take a moment to be absolutely clear about what we're asking you folks to consider. Is this a good place to be? So, for example, when we were out in Kahuku, I'm going to take two parts of this. One is why your folks' input is necessary. So the Kahuku wind farms, and more recently, all the solar farms that you folks have had that are impacting your community, right? They were done through the process that the PUC laid out in a time where what they did was took all the scientific information and then use that to create the request for proposals, go to PUC, get approval. You guys had no idea of all of that until it was PO, and then, oh my goodness, there's going to be a wind farm if you're out in Kahuku, right next to our school and our places to be. So the difference is what we learned out of that, right, in a hard way, is that there's the scientific that is studying all the data, and then there's the actual of us people living here in Hawaii. So to make it very blunt to you folks, if you look at the data, and you guys know this, if you want solar, where's the places you can put them on the island? Mid-Island and West Side. What that doesn't take into account, and you guys all know this, I'm preaching to the choir, is West Side has had the dump for the island, the only dump for many years, but the dump has been in here since early 1900s, right? You guys have had to deal with Makua Valley and the impact of that. You got Kahe power plant built that serves the rest of the island, like the dump serves the rest of the island, right? You guys shouldered those burdens, and you continue to shoulder those burdens, so that the theoretical of, get plenty of sun out here, let's just throw all the solar farms in Waianae, does not allow for social and economic justice and racial justice to be taken into consideration. Okay, you folks all get that. You folks were the ones that helped your community go petition the PUC to change the way that the process was done. And that's why, as boring as it is, this meeting and this set of work is critical, because this work is going to be what determines, it's not the only thing, but it is your folks' voice on where actually, if we can build microgrids, where are they going on the west side? And if we look at more, and we'll have to, because we're aiming for 100% renewable, where should the renewable energy projects that are coming down the pipeline or going to be considered, what should they be? Whether it's wind, solar, geothermal, ocean, whatever, what should they be? And if they are going to be in our neighborhoods, where should they be? So that's kind of that's the second part. But I wanted to really nail down why this is important for you folks. And so what I'd like to do now is give you folks the opportunity to think about what you just saw, which is a lot of information, and give us any feedback that you want on the criteria proposed, the different criteria that we've kind of used as the funnel, right, to see all of the different impacts on the community, and reflect on that and let us know, did we hit the mark? Is there anything that we're missing? That's kind of 30,000 foot level. And then on the ground is, if knowing your guys' communities, where do you think are areas on the coast where microgrids may make sense, may make the most sense? Is that correct? Yeah?
Thank you, Olani. And yeah, multiple ways to contribute. So again, those who are online and in person can contribute via Menti. Everybody is going to see what you enter via that program. If you choose to, if you prefer those here, you can raise your questions and feedback verbally over the microphone. We'll pass that around. As well as for our virtual audience, you can hand raise and we will call upon you, and you'll be actively participating as a virtual participant in the meeting. So lots of different choices and options, whatever works best for you. So again, multiple ways you can add to the Menti. You can raise questions via in person or online via Zoom or through Menti. So a lot of different combinations, and we'll be keeping eyes on all of those different options.
Can we go back to that screen?
Yeah, that screen was good.
Yeah, it came off.
Yeah.
Okay, so Olelo is working. Have some patience with us. We're trying this new way of working with Olelo, and we've got multiple layers of technology. So as we're trying to get the Menti information up and make sure those who are using it are heard, we're also trying to get this on the screen so you guys can reflect. So there's two parts of this, right? The criteria, criticality, vulnerability, social impact, that's like the high-level filter that we get then everything that's on the right. And so our first question to you folks as community members who live all this is, are our criteria hitting it? Or is there something or other things that we're missing in their criteria level that we should also be considering and give weight to? Number one. And then number two, when we're looking at all of these things, do you see up there things from your community that are like, oh yeah, that's super critical? Or is there anything that we're missing? So for example, we all know practically Nanakuli is the choke point, right? You don't come around Nanakuli, you don't get into Waianae. So that is a huge vulnerability to the coast. It's captured up there in the transportation, but are there other things, are there other situations on the coast that you want to bring to our attention? And I'm happy to pass along the mic and you guys can talk. This is your time.
Hi. Okay, so I'm just going to throw it out there. So you folks are addressing the three communities that currently house the majority of the renewable energy systems.
We're addressing the entire island.
Okay, but,
We're going to go around the entire island.
okay, so I guess the notice that I saw only had like 3 or 4 communities. So to me, as a community that's already affected, I would rather point to other communities than tell you where we think it's best to house more here. You know, because to me, we're addressing the injustice of it all, of having all the things that you just mentioned and more, right? So why would I want to offer up more places that our people don't really want? We recognize the need for it. But before we continue to support the rest of the island, we think the rest of the island needs to suck it up, the same way that we have been forced to suck it up.
Honest, appreciated very much. I get it, and we get it. And we need that feedback. Other people don't hear what Waianae people feel and think about what's been put on them. So that is important, and we're noting it, and we appreciate it. Just to be clear, we've got 6 meetings, and we're going to go around to all the moku, the entire island. So it's not just the 3 that are the, most affected. Yeah. So You know, there's people online. This is going to be heard by everybody who wants to listen in on the entire island. And it's important that you folks on the west side make your feelings known. So mahalo nui for that. Just to be clear, when we're talking about microgrids and the placing of microgrids, wherever microgrids get placed, that means that that area has its own independence in, and so that could actually help you folks. That we're thinking that is a lessening of a burden for you. So for example,
It's a positive.
it's a positive. Waianae Health Center, right? That is a huge Waianae Coast Comprehensive, right? Hugely important for this entire coast. To me, that would be a no-brainer. I don't live out here, so that's for you folks to discuss and understand. But like my first thought is like, get that place, you know, microgridded if it isn't already. But that part is important for you guys to also chime in on. Yeah? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I get where we'd want to identify our vulnerabilities and where we want it strengthened. And, you know, even some microgrids that would be a positive to this community. But as far as carrying the burdens of the rest of the island, I think we need to get the rest of the island to start to shoulder some of that. And if not in energy manners, in other ways that affect our resiliency. Traffic. You know, we need better roadways. We need another access road. So how can they help us to fund that? You know, they don't have land or the land is too expensive to put these type of systems. But they can provide, I mean, to me, energy injustice and social injustice crosses a multitude of survival lines. And so that's where we need to get the island and the state, the fake state, to recognize that we're not limited to talking about where we're going to put energy. We need to look about how we're also going to look at our transportation, look at our food sustainability. I mean, supporting our farms out here, what few farms we still have, and trying to encourage more farmer or meat type of production. So, you know, as a whole, I appreciate this being in here, but asking us to identify where we'd want to put it that is for the rest of the island, I think we'll just reserve that information to support Waianae.
Mahalo, and noted deeply. That being said, I'm also going to come back and say what we're looking for is to help support your community with the potential of developing microgrids. So there's a saying that I always try to remember in these situations: let not the perfect be the enemy of the good. We don't have a perfect situation, but if we don't start working on microgrids now, it doesn't get built. So when the next EVA hits and you guys go down, right, you hear what I'm saying? And simultaneously, you reserve the right and you can continue to let the rest of the island know, hey, there's been some injustice out here. You guys got to address that with us too. But let's have both happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alani. You did mention one of the concerns that I have, and that is, so what happens if we have another Eva or Iniki? Our infrastructure resilience, including Hawaiian Electric's, needs to be bolstered. All of our main transmission lines pretty much are along Farrington Highway. I know that you've taken care of, it's 6 to 8 poles in Nanakuli, because they went down a couple different times since I've been home, before or after the hurricanes. But there are other areas on the coastline which also got impacted by the hurricanes that have not been addressed, as far as strengthening that infrastructure, so that, I mean, you can have microgrids until the cows come home, but if you don't have any way to transmit the power, it's not going to help us. So there needs to be a look at how do we improve that infrastructure to the point of being able to take care of those instances so that whatever we come up with for a microgrid, whether it be the back of Nanakuli Valley versus the back of Waianae Valley versus the Mikilua area or whatever, that we can get the power there, that it can circulate. Microgrids do not do us any good if the transmission capability goes out. So I think that we need to take a good hard look at that. I know we had talked about undergrounding, especially the transmission lines along Farrington Highway. I understand the costs, I understand the disruption, and it's probably not the best place given sea level rise and everything else. But let's not wait until we have another disaster to think, oh, that happened to us 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, and we didn't do anything because it's too expensive and we're not sure what we're going to do with it. Do something now. Get your planning in place now and go deal with it's the infrastructure along with this microgridding concept. Microgrids, I'm finally understanding what that all can do as far as potential to help us out. Like you said, keeping Waianae Coast Comprehensive up, keeping the dialysis centers up in Waianae. But if you can't get electricity to it, ain't gonna happen anyway.
Thank you, Cynthia. So a couple of things. I just want to affirm and feed back to you so I can make sure that everybody's heard it clearly, is your point is that there's a vulnerability beyond the ones that we've already talked about in Waianae, and that is the vulnerability of the system in general, because you've seen it go down in different ways. And I've been at the, I was working for the company when the ones on Farrington Highway went down twice. Understood. So what you're saying back to the company is microgrids, great idea. Let's see what we can do. And simultaneously, we need the hardening of our system out here as well. Yeah? Okay. Colton, you had something?
So thank you, Cynthia, for mentioning that. That's actually part of what we're doing. In fact, we just filed an application with the PUC to do just exactly what you said. So it's really powerful and encouraging to hear that comment. And you're totally spot on. Like everything in life, there's no one single solution that solves everything, right? And even tonight, and maybe we could have been more clear about it. Although we're talking now about microgrids, no one here in this room is talking about microgrids as though it is the one thing that can solve everything. Again, like everything in life. So very good comments. It's a good reminder for all of us that we have to think of everything we're looking at and not just get focused on just one thing. So thank you.
Did you want to offer something, Kurt?
No, thank you. And excellent points by Cynthia and Intikopua. Actually spot on and exactly as Colton mentioned, the feedback that we're looking for. This microgrid analysis is really just a part of a bigger picture solution. It's all of what Cynthia mentioned needs to happen in parallel. And so again, microgrids is a new concept. So this is actually one of the first times where we're going out into communities and sharing this concept, but we're not predetermining anything. We're doing some preliminary homework on our side, thanks to Katie and the engineering team, and it's incomplete because it needs input from the community to complete that. But Cynthia's concerns are loud and clear. We also need to focus on our infrastructure, which is happening, and the microgrids again is a component of that. And I'll just touch briefly on what Intikopua raised, because again, those are excellent points, and we are going to take a deep dive into that when we start talking about the renewable energy piece of that too. So it's all relative from an island-wide perspective. We're looking at how can we plan our system to be more equitable? How do we make it more resilient? It's all of these different considerations, and Ken will be talking about this a little bit more. It's really this complex puzzle we're trying to solve, but it really requires working with communities to figure out how to make the pieces fit together. We can figure things out technically, but as Alani said earlier, it's not it may not be what's best for communities, and that's why we need to improve our planning and work with community.
Do I have a hot mic? This one. Okay. Sorry, Justin, thank you. So yay, we got the Menti up and running. I don't want to take the whole night to talk about everything, but I see one that I wanted to highlight and throw back to the company. I'm going to read it. The concept is fantastic. I'm assuming he's talking about, or they are talking about microgridding, and relevant to the current situation of our energy crisis. But one criteria that I wonder is if cultural sites were included in consideration that may lay in scientifically ideal locations for renewable energy. Who would like from Hawaiian Electric to respond to that?
I can take the first stab, Alani, and that's an excellent point. That this analysis hasn't included that, and so that information is critical to this planning. And we haven't yet, that's actually going to be a question that we're going to be introducing a few questions from now. But really that's again something that the community knows that Hawaiian Electric or developers don't know. And that ties into another question that's shown here too with respect to the costs for what it would cost to build or construct a microgrid. This is all connected to a bigger picture plan where, and Ken can maybe speak more to this, there's a PUC docket called the Microgrid Service Tariff. So eventually, all of this information is going to be used to put out procurement or request for proposals to construct microgrids on the island of Oahu. And so that's, again, how all of this feeds into the long-range planning of making this information available to developers to propose low cost to construct and to bid basically to build microgrids on the island of Oahu.
Let me make one point. I'm going to go back to the cultural sites issue. I've worked, you folks know, I've worked on burial issues for the last 20 years. And there's two caveats or two finer points to that question. One is that any project that is going to be PUC approved is going to have to go through the legal process, which will require some sort of level of state historic preservation review. However, and I'm going to give an example that we learned out in Waianae, back in the mid-2000s, Hawaiian Electric was actually considering building a wind farm on the slopes above Kahe, and some of you folks were involved in that. We back then went to the community and spent a whole year with you folks dialoguing over whether that was the right thing to do or not. The interesting thing that came up with was the State Historic Preservation Division did not have on their books the fact that that point was an important navigational site for the entire island of Oahu, and especially the west side, because it wasn't the specificity of an actual, like, literal thing, right? There wasn't an ahu that they could point to. So this is where there's a level of coverage that we can, that the state can offer, and that we will certainly review and get all the information, but it's your folks' own cultural knowledge of this side that we need to know and developers need to know so that we don't make big mistakes. Lahi Lahi Point, another important site, right, that maps out, triangulates out to sea to different areas. That's not on any books. Now it's starting to get in there, but it's not initially known. So there's that coverage. So I just wanted to highlight those things as why community input is important. Ken.
Okay, I'm gonna, just a small clarification on the financial impact side. So the way, the genesis or the start of this microgrid mapping was to support a customer program. So customers have the ability, or groups of customers have the ability to develop these microgrids. And so with that development, they would fund it on their own. However, the data that we're getting through this mapping process, we will use that data to look at whether, there may be instances where hybrid microgrids make sense to provide reliability. So, for example, usually microgrids are used as an alternative to building a new line, perhaps, to meet our reliability goal or metrics. So in those cases, that's when, like what Kurt was saying, we would potentially go out for an RFP for those. So I just wanted to clarify that this is to kind of support both of those levels, is customer funded or utility funded.
Thank you, Ken. Do any of you folks from the community have any other comments where we should place it, or them? Where would be ideal places that you could think of? Cynthia affirmed and Kapua affirmed Waianae Coast Comp is one area. Are there other places? And then I just wanted to point out, when we went to Kahuku side, that one that was in the middle, sorry, the Menti, it said identify Mauka areas. That side of the island, right, we know is like butt up against the mountains and sea even tighter in most places than this side. But the reality is, when we're in trouble, we got to go Mauka. And so are there Mauka areas that you folks know that we may not know that are important to consider in this? So for example, one of the attendees on Monday night said, the Kahana people all go up, the community goes up to a dam in Kahana. And it's not on our maps, but apparently that's where they go when things from the ocean are getting dicey and they got to go Mauka. And so that's important for us to know, to take into our planning and consideration. Are there areas, Waianae side, West Coast side, that you folks want to bring to our attention?
Mauka side, especially for our Nanakuli Maili community, would be Lualuale Naval Magazine. I mean, that's one of the higher spots, especially for our Nanakuli Lualuale Ahupua'a, and it's more accessible for them. I mean, we always say go up, but there are the people in Maili that could probably get to Lualuale safer than coming up Waianae Valley or going up to Nanakuli. So, yeah,
Understood.
military spaces.
Understood and noted. Are there, you folks in the front, did you have any comments that you wanted to make? This is long-term planning and thinking, so we don't expect everybody to be able to jump out the gate and give. But we got ways and time to capture that data. Kanani, do we have anything online? Okay.
I just wanted to add, Alani, that this, as Alani said, this requires a lot of thought, and we shared a lot of information tonight. And so, for those again here tonight and virtually, please do visit us on the website that was mentioned, the ETIP website, because these same questions are accessible there. All the maps, all the information that was shared here in tonight's meeting are available online. You can also, if you prefer, to email us with thoughts and comments. We'll receive it any way you are able to give it to us, because this will all be helpful as part of our documentation and planning process. And again, if you know anyone in the community that could add to this conversation, we welcome that. And so it's not just tonight's meeting that's the end all. As Alani said, this is going to be a continual, ongoing planning process. And we really need this input in order to make sure that our planning is as inclusive as possible. We don't want to leave any thoughts out. We want to try build in as much in the early stages as we can, and to continue these conversations as we move forward. But again, appreciate all of the mana'o and the thoughts that are being shared tonight, because a question like this is something that can easily be overlooked when we're running the analysis using the criteria. It again looks at all the technical sites, but again, if there's a site that is known as a community gathering place that's elevated, and again, as Alani mentioned, Ha'ula has done a lot of really great work there. They're building a resilience hub on their own because they don't have a gathering place or facility in their current constructed structures that could be a good site for that. So, and again, that dovetails with the work that the Centers for Resilient Neighborhoods are doing across the island as well. So there's a lot of connections here. We're working closely with the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency at the city, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency at the state, as well as Department of Emergency Management. So our hope is that by you providing us this information, we're going to be sharing it with our partners and other planners as we move forward as well. So just really appreciate all of the insights being shared.
Thank you. So we're getting close to the turn point where we're going to go into the bigger discussion about renewable energy placement and type. But before that, one of my our team mentioned or noted that we did get some information via Menti. Yeah, so Kaupuni Park in Waianae Valley Homestead and Community Learning Center, that would be here, right, in Maili? No? It's at Kea. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so this military sites indeed, love it. Okay, so, and just to be clear, all of this is going to be put into a report and sent around to everybody. And to the extent that Hawaiian Electric can take it to the appropriate places, like the Kahuku guy said Monday night, they cannot talk to the heads of firemen, the firemen and the policemen. They won't sit down and talk with them to coordinate. And so that's not to say that Hawaiian Electric can do that in the sense of like fix that, but what they do commit to doing is taking all of this information and sharing it with the appropriate entities. So they have relationships with the military. So your word and those that are on the site, it's getting noted, and they'll take those messages to them. I'll let him go first since, yeah.
Is there a specific size to the microgrid? In other words, if you're looking at just doing Waianae Coast Comprehensive Center, is there surrounding areas around that to be included within the microgrid?
Thanks for that question. Go ahead, Ken.
Good question. Actually, the hybrid microgrid program has a kind of a max size, which is 3 megawatts, which is fairly large. And that's pretty much to size it to what would be considered as large as a distribution feeder, so one distribution line feeding multiple customers. It can be smaller. What this actually does is it takes in the circuit information as well, and then based on these criteria, it also looks at the circuit architecture so that it can kind of size these microgrids. Because basically you need switching to isolate it.
I want to ask a follow-up to your question, and that is, can you give us a real-world example on the island of what that 3 megawatt area might look like so that we can put in our, yeah?
Okay. The one that comes to mind in this area is, and sorry, I don't know the place names, but I can see it on like a Google map. There's a elementary school in Waianae, and then that circuit goes all the way up the coast and feeds there. Well, there's a neighborhood around that area, still goes up, and then there's another community on the ocean side, and then goes up to Kaena Point. So that circuit up between the school and up to Kaena Point is generally around the potential size of a hybrid microgrid.
If you go back to If you go back to the island level map, I think we have a few of them identified in Waianae.
Let's take the time to do that, so everybody gets a good idea. Can we pull up that map?
This map? Yeah, it's kind of hard to see though.
The other one that has the multiple is blowing up.
I think what you're talking about, it's the last school on the north end of the coast, right?
The last school, so that would be Makaha Elementary.
Makaha Elementary?
It's
Yeah.
not the one by Kamaili Academy, which goes up.
I think it's Makaha.
Makaha?
Okay, here's another question. Is there any other place on the island that you know better?
So,
Because we all travel around.
This is the example of Haula.
Okay, there you go.
So and this is just a sample, but this is basically two different microgrids, two different potential microgrids. So it consists of, quite a bit of homes and maybe even businesses within it.
What
So
we
the
can do,
dash line.
what we can do, and I'm asking this as a question, can we, as part of our homework, get at least one or two microgrid potential areas mapped out for YNI that we could give them as an example? Okay, so we'll get you that information going forward. Yeah, but that's a great question. I think it was Sydney that gave that. Thank you very much. Are there any other either questions, clarifying questions, or feedback that you folks would like to give relative to microgrids? Again, this is just the start of the conversation.
Okay, so going back to here, this screen, we can identify sites, but we need to make sure that we have trained community members that know how to receive the lower coastal community that's going to be coming up, because I live right up the street from Kaupuni Park. And so we know that there is a lot of community that already knows, but it's not necessarily in the most orderly manner that we're stacking our vehicles. I mean, sometimes they put up tents, and there's really no organization or command that I'm familiar with. So we don't want to be scientific and just put a pin on the map. We do want to make sure that we also have the component of trained community volunteers so that these sites can temporarily welcome the most people that it can before we have to look for other upland sites.
Mahalo for that. So just to feed back to you, what you're saying is it's all well and good that we can build these hubs, but we also have to have the human infrastructure, the humans that can run it. And so we do have, Hawaiian Electric does a lot of coordination with disaster management, the different groups. And so noted, and we will make sure that that's part of the discussion going forward. Mahalo. Anybody else before we transition over to the next part of the meeting? Okay, cool. Thank you. Go for it. Who's next? Oh, we do have a line? We might have something online, so we're just...
Nothing in addition to what was already documented
Okay.
so far.
Sure, I'm seeing your face online, so just to remember, if you've got anything that you want to add to the meeting, I know you've been a major voice out here, please let us know. Okay, next.
But I think so. One of the other questions too that just to think about. Again, we're not here to solve that tonight. But as the way Ken explained, the way that microgrids work is it does require a power source, and so that's just again a thought to consider when microgrids are developed. Because again, these have the ability to be isolated from the actual grid. And so as we're thinking about the development of microgrids in the Waianae Moku, we also want to ask for input from the community on what types of renewable generation technology should be considered to power the microgrid. And then again, that would be isolated to that community or whatever facilities critical facilities that are being served. So again, we can think about that. That is all going to be accessible via, again, online or email comments or handwritten. Again, those are all the different ways where you can share your ideas and thoughts with us. We're just showing this because it's something recent that Hawaiian Electric has launched. It is an attempt on our part to take the same long-range planning information that our engineers are looking at and to make that accessible to communities and to also make it easier to participate. So no longer do you need to, on your own, file with the Public Utilities Commission. We want to help with that. Again, that's part of what this process that we're implementing tonight is, to receive comments in an easier format, document that on the community's behalf, and to the extent where we can show alignment or answer questions or get information to the right place, we will integrate that as part of the planning. So I just encourage everyone, if you have time, to visit hawaiipower.com. There's going to be reference point to get to the ETIP website, and actually this next part that Ken's going to be introducing is what Inti Kapua raised in the earlier part of this meeting. So now, we're talking more at the microgrid level, thinking about things from an island-wide standpoint in terms of reaching our decarbonization goals by 2045. We acknowledge that there are much improvements that need to be made to the planning processes and to include community voice as part of that process. And so this really, what Ken's going to be sharing was a technical analysis where they looked at 2 technologies, wind and solar, to start, because those are the most cost feasible currently. And a technical analysis was done to look at the island of Oahu to see where the resource potential, the land potential was available. And then technically, we looked at that resource information and saw where can those renewable sources connect to the grid. And so that's what Ken will be sharing with us, that analysis that, again, is not a plan, it's nothing formal, it's really just this study or analysis that was done that we're trying to make available to communities to see the same information that developers are seeing. When they're looking at the island of Oahu, they're looking at this type of technical information. And then we want to give communities the opportunity to comment on these sites, exactly to comment what Cynthia and Tikapua raised in a PUC filing, as well as what was referenced here tonight. It doesn't need to be limited to this moku. It can be island-wide. And so that's the discussion we'll be having. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. Okay, so this is sort of related to what we were talking about, but also larger. So this is a long-term planning function. And so when we, in our planning for, to get to 100% renewables, which is, 2045, we also have intermediate goals, which are very aggressive. We have to look at different factors, and these are just kind of the main factors. There's a lot of other things that we have to take into account, but one is time, the time it takes to actually develop these types of resources, the time to also put in the necessary transmission infrastructure to accept these resources onto the system. And actually, so my primary job is to make sure we have enough transmission and distribution capacity on the system, which means that as we start to accept more renewable energy, as we start to retire fossil fuel units, we have to plan for where these types of facilities may go, and develop requirements develop the requirements to support that. And when we talk about transmission, to build transmission, to upgrade transmission, it takes a long time, 10 plus years, I would say at minimum, but yeah, around there. So when you look at 2045, you back up 10, 15 years, you're at 2030, and we're already at 2022. So to get to that 100% goal, that's why we're starting now, and we got to work on these. In addition to time, affordability, we have to make sure that we can stabilize bills as we bring these resources on. Land use, what types of, are we making the best use of the land? Are we making sure that this land that we're going to be using for renewable energy is the right thing to do? Also, energy sources, what type of resources do we use? Primarily, or in the recent request for proposals or RFPs, a lot of it has been solar or wind. Technology changes. We have to keep an eye on that. And then community, which is a big part of it, and that's why we're here. That's why we're going to continue to be here. We have to make sure that the community is along with us as we plan for these resources. And then also taking into account resilience and reliability. We have to make sure that at the end of the day, the lights stay on, and we look for opportunities to improve resilience so that we can withstand these types of events that that may occur. where are we today? This is a map showing where all the different resources are on the island. So that's where all these little dots are. And a lot of it is solar, which is the sun, the sun dot. So today we have what's called as available renewable capacity, which is 1,143 megawatts. That's the essentially the renewable energy, the solar and wind energy that we have on the system. Of that 1,143, 763 of that are customer-sited renewables. So rooftop solar, generally rooftop solar and storage. And if we're to meet our renewable goals, I want to make it clear that we have to be aggressive on both fronts, which is the utility scale, the large scale, large scale renewable resources, as well as aggressive rooftop or customer-sited resources or rooftop solar and storage systems. In development today, we have 384 megawatts being developed around the island. And on top of that, we have firm capacity. So, like the Kahe, Waiau resources, that provides 1,600 megawatts. Not just Kahe, Waiau, those are just examples, but, large power plants. And as we start to reduce those resources, we're going to need to increase the renewable capacity. So that's where we are today. To get to 100%, we have to, increase at kind of all fronts. I don't want you to take away that this map. So first of all, this analysis is the start. So as we plan out for this long-term horizon, what we need to start looking at is what are the potential areas that could be used for development, and what are the potential requirements to support those developments. And so that's why we're now gathering community feedback on the areas that have the potential to site resources. And so that's what's called a renewable energy zone analysis. And so in this analysis, it looked at more the technical side of it, which is where is there the best sun, where is there the best wind, and then also it took into account areas that shouldn't be used for development or may not be used for development, such as like ag lands, I'm drawing a blank, tsunami evacuation zones, and other considerations. So after we minus out those types of things, we're left with what's shown in the green shaded areas. So that is what we call the technical potential. That's where could technically be used to develop solar or wind projects. And this analysis, again, is to figure out what are the required transmission requirements to support this basically megawatt capacity. So even though we're showing solar or wind potential, and that's just because that's primarily what we've been getting, and that's also what the data that we have. It could be other types of resources that are added there. It's just looking at how much power are you putting into the system at these various areas. And so, so that's where we're at, and so what we want to do with this map is get input on what areas make sense for development and what areas should we be cautious about, essentially. So we have this map online, and we're also going to get some feedback here. Yep. And okay, so we can.
Ready for feedback?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because Sydney has a question.
So if you go back to that map, right, there's 138 kV substations in key areas. And I
think that's reading it wrong, incorrectly. In group 3, it says internet connection Kahe 138 kV. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
What does that
substation-
represent?
The substation represents the power that's bumped up to in order to transmit it a long distance, right? So if you're going to be doing microgrids, you're not going to be creating 138 kVA from a microgrid. So can that distribution from those other areas be reduced so you don't have to bump it up, and then having those microgrids create power to that community? In other words, more distribution versus centralization.
Yeah, so Sydney, you're spot on, right? So in the earlier discussion, we were talking about microgrid opportunities. You're exactly right. Given the size of what will most probably be the kinds of sizes that people want to develop microgrids in, it will be connected at the distribution level, right? So the lines and substations that are local to your community, they're lower voltage, 12,000 volts. And that's a high enough powered set of lines to power, say, a 3 megawatt or smaller area. And you're totally right. And so for microgrids, and if you're going to develop microgrids on any part of any one of the islands we serve, it's going to be in these kind of, on a map, it's going to be these tiny dots, right? Because it's going to be small, it's going to be local. For this discussion here and these maps that Ken just walked us through, this is looking at the island in total to create renewable energy at very large volumes, a lot of renewable energy generation to feed and serve ultimately the entire island. So the map here, and really focus on the green shaded areas for now, kind of ignore the purple shading for now. The green areas are the places where, as Ken described, the sun is shining, or where the wind is blowing consistently high over the course of a year, where the renewable resource is, and where you have that combination of geography and land zoning, where it's more suitable today to develop renewable systems, right? And from that, we can identify from the analysis how much renewable energy can be developed in that region. That's where it's going to be, could be located. These are all the different possibilities. But ultimately, unlike the discussion we had earlier about microgrids, this is about renewable energy that ultimately could be developed to serve all parts of the island. Yeah. Yes, and I'm sorry for not finishing that up. Yeah, so at that higher, so if we're talking about, say, developing in Zone 4, just because this is central, right in the middle of the picture, the amount of power potentially that could be developed when we looked at the maps is over 300 megawatts of renewable energy being developed there, right? And so to make use of 300 megawatts and actually be able to connect it safely, and whether you use it just in central Oahu or send it to the rest of the island, you're going to need to connect to it at that high transmission level, the 138 kV level.
So I noticed that it's really focused on wind and solar. What about geothermal?
Before you folks answer that, I just want to make a clarification, because if it's not clear to you, then it may not be clear to people who are online. And that is that the first part of this presentation was about literally microgrids. This second part is macrogrid, right? So that's where and we apologize. It is confusing. So what we've transitioned to in this second half is about the massive, big solar farms, wind farms. Where should they go and where should they not go? That's what this second part is about. But to get back to your question, go ahead.
So the question was, this looks at wind and solar potential, but what about other types of resources? And you said geothermal. We don't have a map that shows potential geothermal, but what this analysis is for is to figure out how much potential power we should be planning for in certain areas, certain regions, so that we can develop the necessary transmission requirements to connect that to our transmission network.
Yeah, so Sydney you asked specifically about geothermal, and that's actually a really good example to use. Right now, I don't think anyone knows with any strong sense, scientific-based sense, where are better or worse geothermal locations on the island of Oahu. There's a lot of, I think, potential for it, but no one exactly knows how much and exactly where. So that's actually one of the things that if we had the data, we would add it to this map. And so because that data is not there, we've been asking, the state and the U.S. Department of Energy to say, hey, is this something you can help us with, right? But for today, right now, what we have is, for Hawaii, we have wind and solar data, and so we use that for these maps. But hopefully sometime soon and in the future, we can have other renewable resource technology maps where we know, yes, this is a location where geothermal or any other renewable resource has a more likely potential for development. Katie?
There we go. I want to add from the National Renewable Energy Lab, being on the geospatial data science team, this is kind of our bread and butter, is modeling all of the different renewable energy technologies and how much energy they can make given the constraints of like land availability, incompatible land uses, physical attributes like slope, swelling soil, stuff like that. And so there isn't really an available tool set at this point in time to look at geothermal specifically at a larger geographic extent, whether that's island-wide or on all of the mainland. But one of the things that we're actually working on this fiscal year at NREL is incorporating geothermal technology into our renewable energy potential tool. And we're hoping to have that ready to start running other places than our test sites, probably in 2024. But otherwise, there are existing data sets or options to look at other renewable energy technologies like hydrokinetic marine and whatnot. So just want to throw that in there.
Thank you, Katie. Oh, what was that?
Hydrogen technology?
Hydrogen.
We're working on it.
They're working on it. Okay. Just wanted to take note. It is 8:22, and we're about 8 minutes out. Just as taking note.
Going back to that map again, I will bring up, I'll be the broken record. I don't see anything in the Honolulu or around Pearl Harbor area, and I will get on my broomstick again and say, where's the rooftop for all the high rises that we have in there? They all don't have solar on top of them. I know it's a lot smaller space in individual units for planning, but I think there's a lot of potential there. There's been a lot more rhetoric lately about allowing the elevation above the standard X foot level for buildings to be able to build above the equipment for the building so that potentially solar could be placed over that for that elevation. So if there is other people talking about it, and I don't see it on this map here, you're missing out a big potential in my mind. And again, that was one of the things that we had brought up with the PUC when we had gone in and said, what about all these other things besides just putting stuff on raw land? And I don't see it reflected here, Colton.
Two things I just want to add on to that. This is the second time I'm facilitating, and it's always made me wonder, why is there no colored areas in the East Honolulu and Eva Beach, Kapolei areas. So relative to hers and my add-on, is there anybody from the company that wants to address those issues?
I'll do the first piece. So Cynthia, you provided that comment, I think, what was it, about 8 months ago or so, on a virtual meeting that we had. So, our apologies. We are looking at, as Ken mentioned, at smaller customer-sited, like on condos, like on townhomes, like on commercial buildings, and single-family homes. We failed to put them on these maps, so I think that's on us. But we are looking at that as well. So next time we come back, we'll make sure we have both of those maps.
Then can anybody address all the big white areas?
Yeah. So this map shows the technical potential, which takes into account the solar and wind data, but also takes out different types of lands. Going off the top of my head, so it takes out ag areas, urban areas, conservation. Yeah, thanks. Class A ag, 90% of Class B and C. Slope.
Forests.
Okay, so what you're saying is because of those multitude of criteria, that essentially adds up. Like urban area, well, then that makes sense for East Honolulu. We know that some of the best ag land is out in Kapolei and that area, as well as being urbanized. So that's why you're saying those areas are white, if it falls under all those different criteria. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And this is calculated at a 90-meter scale.
Which equals about 90
Most
meters is about 300 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kitty. Okay, we're coming close, where it's 8:26. This is, again, just the beginning of this conversation that is gonna need to be years. So, one last comment?
I'm just going to piggyback on Cynthia's comment in that even though it's white, we should have some dots for rooftop, because otherwise we're saying we're continuing to have the rest of the island support 30% of the island. And we really need everybody to help support it. So encouraging that individual rooftop and smaller projects.
Mahalo nui, I appreciate it.
If I
Noted.
may, Alani, can we go to the map, the website for Hawaii Powered that shows the link to the virtual map? So this is a tool that we wanted to introduce to all of you, and this is something that we hope will make it easier and more accessible. But that same map that we're talking about here, we created this kind of like a Google Map feature that helps to provide comments. So hawaiipower.com/oahu, you'll get this map where you can zoom in and drop pins and comments. So really, to the extent that Cynthia and Tikapua shared with us earlier, we can absolutely highlight what you mentioned, where you have no areas where they're not showing the potential for renewable energy, but should be considered. Drop pins and you can place those comments, and that's going to be documented as part of this process. So again, this is a way of capturing community input that's going to be used not only for this process, but also for renewable energy procurements, so that when this MOKU says things about sites that are within its own MOKU or even the rest of the island, it'll be documented for everybody to see. PUC, Hawaiian Electric, and even developers, they would know that documented feedback, in addition to what the West Oahu Kalailoa Clean Energy Ohana has already filed. This would be more site-specific ways where people can comment before anything is even proposed. So this is a tool again, and we hope that, we're going to be launching more efforts to get this out into community. But our hope is that this would be another way on top of filing things written or documented, where you can be site specific and point out concerns and opportunities, whatever is important to communities, we hope to capture. But this is just another means of trying to provide that vehicle for information collection.
So we've got just about 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank you folks all for being here. This is hard, it's difficult, it's deep, and it's kind of boring. And yet you folks show up, and you're here, and you're into it, and we appreciate it. And it's a long process. So just wanted to acknowledge, mahalo nui. Any last words, Kurt, that you wanted to share?
No, mahalo, Olani. Mahalo to all of you for joining us here. We are absolutely not pau with this process. Again, this is just the beginning. A lot of the purpose of these workshops and going around is just to introduce these concepts to community and to the different moku across the island so that we can all have the same information. And so, Ken, if we can go to the last slide, please. There are all of that information we hope to make available on hawaiipowered.com. We're going to be improving these maps, as Colton mentioned earlier. A lot of what we have is what we have currently, but there's a lot that Katie mentioned needs to be added to, especially to what Intikapu and Cynthia said and Sid. We need to refine these analyses and studies as we go, and community input is going to be critical in doing that. And capturing all of that as we go to the different communities is going to be extremely helpful for us, because this, as Ken mentioned, is a long-term planning process. So to the extent you'll invite us to come to your meeting, community venues or meetings, we would be happy to bring this information with us. We are not trying to solve all of this by the end of this year. This is going to be a continuation and an ongoing process. So to the extent you have questions, comments, please do comment. You can contact me directly. You can send your documented concerns, questions, and comments to the igp@hawaiianelectric.com website. And again, all of this information is going to be compiled and filed. And you have our commitment, as Alani said, that it will not be doctored or paraphrased. It will be in your own community's words. And we'll be compiling that and again, helping to show interests that are aligned and opinions on what should and shouldn't go in certain areas. We want to capture all of that information. So just mahalo to all of you, and we hope to see you again at future planning discussions.
For all of you that joined online and are watching the live feed, thank you folks for being here. For you guys that are here, we're not shutting down. Please, stay and talk with us if you like, but we're ending the live broadcast. So mahalo nui for that.
Well, even though the live broadcast is POW, I just want to put in a shameless plug for our Energize Waianae program, which is part of the Solarize 808. So in Waianae Moku, we will be rolling that out shortly, starting next month.
Mahalo nui. Sydney.
So I just wanted to let you know that I sit on a committee called Renew, Rebuild Hawaii. And November 17th, we're going to be actually having a webinar on geothermal. So we have representatives from the Puna Geothermal, University of Hawaii, and some other entities. So that might be where you get some valuable information. You can ask questions and stuff like that. And even if it goes offline, we'll get the answers to you once it's provided. Also, we just did one, was it 2 months ago, on OTEC. So OTEC is another alternative for firm power that I didn't bring up because I just didn't want to blow people away online.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any other comments from you folks that you want to?